Welcome to Conversations with My Sister's Keepers, where we bring awareness, share stories, and promote healing-centered conversations for lived experience professionals and allies in the gender-based violence and recovery sectors. I'm Shameen Brown, and together we'll explore strategies, resources, and insights to support wellness, recovery, and leadership. Join us as we challenge stigma, celebrate autonomy, and normalize the healing journey. Let's build a community of understanding and empowerment, one conversation at a time.
Okay. Hello, thank you for joining me today. Today I have with us Celia Williamson. Dr. Celia Williamson has been engaged in anti-trafficking work for over 30 years. She has published numerous articles, books, and reports. She founded the first anti-trafficking program in Ohio in 1993 and directly worked with victims in Toledo for several years. Dr. Williamson possesses 2 doctorate degrees, one in social work and an honorary doctorate in social justice. During her career, Dr. Williamson brought $3.5 million to the community for research and services. She co-hosts the oldest and largest annual academic conference on human trafficking in the world and has included representatives from all 50 US states and 60 countries. She founded the first anti-trafficking coalition in her county and has been named the 14th most influential social worker in the nation within the last 10 years. She ranks among the top 100 globally and historically. Currently, she serves as the executive director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. We are so happy to have her here with us today. One of my heroes, Dr. Celia Williamson. Nice to have you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shameen, for doing this. And you, of course, are one of my heroes. And I'm just so thankful to have the opportunity to be on here to talk about, what I've done and what I do.
I love it. I love it. So, conversations with my sister's keepers are crucial for survivors and survivor leaders everywhere. We're really feeling that it's time to advance beyond trauma-informed and resilience-based narratives of surviving, thriving, and leading, and to embrace a healing-centered focus on wellness and recovery. So this is part of our aim to challenge the stigma and judgment that many survivors encounter during their healing process. By sharing insights into our own recovery and wellness journeys and our knowledge of the recovery and wellness journeys of others, we can normalize the ongoing and cyclical nature of the recovery experience. What do you feel about that? Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I love that because I really feel if we bring our authentic selves to the table, to the community, to society, we really can begin to normalize the fact that there are a number of us on a healing journey from whatever may have happened. And if we can normalize that, we can open the doors, and we open the doors, we can all open our hearts, and, we can do better work instead of work undercover. We can kind of do work very authentically.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much, doing this work authentically. I think it's so important, especially, when we think about the experience of trafficking and being trafficked and how your voice is silenced,
Mhm.
right? Um, you can't speak up for yourself in a lot of different situations, and you're experiencing a lot of stigma when you do, not getting the supports that you need. And so being able to have these conversations and normalize some of those experiences might also help people in understanding some of the behaviors of folks
Mhm.
who are in this work and that are needing a bit more support.
Absolutely.
Over the next 3 years, the goals of the Canadian G100 Anti-Human Trafficking Wing are to promote lived experience leadership and autonomy, to support the wellness of lived experience staff, to develop survivor-led, survivor-informed, and survivor-facilitated prevention and intervention programs, and to identify ally organizations that are invested authentically in survivor leadership. What do you think about these goals of G100 Canada? Are there any gaps, strengths, barriers? What are your thoughts?
Well, my initial thoughts is I'm very jealous that you're in Canada, and I think you should be in the US doing these things. But I'm very proud. I love those goals, and eh, I love the idea that this should be a survivor-led movement, and anybody who is genuinely concerned about this issue and not their own egos or their own whatevers will know and understand that that is the goal, that's the dream to uh help those folks gain their voice, power in their voice, lead movements, lead programs. That is the goal, so that the rest of us can go and tackle whatever, be a support, be the wind, beneath their wings, be all the things that support, but some of us are too interested in leading and using our egos. Our egos go before us, and that gets us in trouble. And I don't think many of us even understand the real definition of collaboration, or
Mhm.
that you don't always have to be the leader. You can, I make a pretty good follower too. I can lead in areas where there's gaps, but I'm a real good follower. Somebody that I trust and has integrity in their leading. I love to follow good leaders. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think those goals set your country, in my opinion, on the right path.
Thank you. I love that. And on the topic of leading and following, I'll say I hate to lead. I do it out of necessity, but always looking for someone else to take the reins.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I
that's
feel
good
so much
too.
more comfortable helping folks, develop their own leadership
Mm.
and, being a voice in the background that helps people think through things and plan things and
Yeah.
readjust things, as opposed to, being the one who makes all of those decisions and
Mhm.
guides, or I guess leads that process.
Mhm. Mhm.
I do love to be the one to support and see how people grow and see how things take place when there's more ideas than just my own, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Building on the strengths of others.
absolutely.
So I would love, Celia, I know before we started recording, I had kind of asked you a little bit about your lived experience and what that looked like, because we've known each other for around 6 or 7 years now, but I didn't know that part about you. So how do you feel about walking us through some of your lived experiences, and both and expertise in education, of course, in both supporting and perhaps even having survived abuse, trauma, addictions, mental health, any of
Yeah.
those types of challenges?
Well, I think, from my lived experience, it of course has shaped who I am and why I do what I do. I have evolved, elevated, from those experiences, but those experiences really shaped my heart and put me on a path to help other people. And it's through those experiences that I feel authentic, and I feel like I'm in the right place to be doing this. And so I think two major, and then some less impactful, but two major experiences I had. I was a victim of domestic violence, particularly intimate partner violence, not once but twice.
Mhm.
Through my life, I just didn't know. I think I got myself into that situation because I don't think I felt worthy, um, of
Mhm.
having somebody who respected me. And so, those lasted about 8 years in total. And I think it also just this feeling of worthlessness, I think that I felt really came from what I call like, systems trauma. And um,
Mhm.
you know, I went to a high school that when I asked for the college materials, they refused them. They put me in my senior high school, my whole senior high school experience was being in home economics. I mean, from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And I didn't have special needs. Um,
Wow.
so that was sort of the school system saying to me, like, we give up on you. I hope that you can cook so that you can work a fast food job or something. Like, we don't have faith. When I went to my healthcare appointments, they consisted of pap smears to see if I had a sexually transmitted disease. I thought until I was 30 years old that that was what a physical was. I did not know that other people got their blood pressure checked and got blood work done. I knew none of that. It was always, do you have a sexually transmitted disease? You don't? Okay, you're done. And, my whole family being, Black in America, back in the day, we were quickly redlined into a poor neighborhood, and redlining, of course, in the US is when realtors and housing markets, everybody agrees that we are going to designate this very poor area with pollutants and poor environment, and we're going to let you all live here. And, despite my dad trying to get loans to which he could afford, because he worked for the government, um, and left the house every day in a suit and tie, but because he was Black, you can't get the loan to live here. You have to live here. So people in my neighborhood, their parents were struggling. The kids went off to the children's home sometimes. There was alcoholism, there was drugs, poor, very poorly rated school system. And so those traumas of telling you in every system, healthcare system, school system, you don't matter. That I think impacted my self-esteem, probably more than anything, and then led me into, of course, with this buying into what society keeps telling me, led me to choose partners in my life that were abusive, that continued to tell me in physical ways that you are indeed worthless. And so I think and that's why I'm so happy about this, a podcast like this, is because it doesn't just say, hey, so tell us about your successes and I always call them like your REEL. Oh, here's the highlights of my success story, on Facebook and Instagram or whatever. And then I like to call it your REAL, like what's really going on. Because I think if people knew where some people came from or overcame or still struggle with, they'd be like, oh, all right, well then, yeah, I could still hold on to my dreams and hopes, even though I came from here or I still struggle with this. So
Mhm.
I love that there's an opportunity to talk about those things. But I think those are probably the two traumas that really impacted and shaped, why I became a social worker and why I wanted to help people.
Yeah. So there's some systemic violence, some racial violence, some,
Yes.
I'm even hearing some like hermeneutic, I'm like struggling
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
word, but just this idea that because of who you are, you know less, and being provided less, epistemic injustice as well, right? Being provided less
Absolutely.
access to
Absolutely.
knowledge. Hearing your story, I think how amazing to see where you are today as a doctorate. Oh my God, I will never do that. As someone who has their doctorate has, like, it's grueling. And to know that you were raised, grew up, not raised, sorry, but you grew up in an environment that basically told you that you could never be that you shouldn't even try to be that,
Yes.
is, very powerful and profound. And I think it speaks a lot to how many survivors of gender-based violence um, have these messages that we're holding on to, that we allow to limit us, allowing the external world to define us based often on colonial constructs of who we are.
Exactly. That is so true. And the thing that I did have was I had parents who said, you will go to school and you can do anything. You can. And so I see my friends, none of my friends graduated high school. And, when I look back, there were some protective factors I had. There was, of course, my family, plenty dysfunctional, like everybody's family, but they did say, you can work hard and you can do things. And so I had that. And I think a lot of my friends didn't have that. And so that really, the compounding what's happening in their lives, and then a family that might have struggled or didn't really appreciate, it sort of derailed their lives. Whereas I had four other sisters. We are all Black women. And so we know how to roll our heads and tell you off and not listen. And I think, not listening sometimes is a virtue, and not being polite all the time is a virtue. And unfortunately, a lot of women have been taught to be polite and not to talk back and to listen. I didn't listen. I said, I see these people on television and they have things and they look pretty happy. And you're telling me that I can't have these things. And I'm just hard-headed enough not to listen. I've been that all my life. I think my sisters are too. And I'm very thankful for that. And I want women to hear that being hard-headed and not listening is not always a bad thing. So
It's a superpower. I mean, honestly, in a lot of the work that I do, like you've said so many things that I find really valuable, right? So when I talk about victimization, for example, I'm not looking at specific vulnerability factors. It doesn't matter to me what the specific incident is that happened. At the end of the day, we're looking at what did it cause? And it caused low self-esteem. And it caused you to swallow your voice instead of own it. And what we need to do is move towards owning our voice, owning our truth, as opposed to, allowing our voices to be limited by the truths of others.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's poetic because it's so true, and it's hard to convey to people that is the core. You have to begin to step forward. And I know that little voice in you that has said, don't do it, or I'm afraid, or that little voice,
I'm a
that little
fraud.
voice.
That's a big one. Yeah.
I mean, it has served to protect us, of course, when we were vulnerable or we're still fearful, but sometimes you just have to have that hard-headedness, is what I call it, that not listening to those people who have you pegged and saying you are about this,
Yeah.
because you know that you're multifaceted and you know that you're multi-talented. And so, you got to start turning that voice up a little each
Well,
time.
in 2018, you said some really important things to me that have stuck with me for quite some time. And
Oh,
one of
what's that?
them is simply that, there's always someone who's going to say yes. So, if they're not listening to me in my own community, in my own backyard, just keep talking. So that was one. And relative to that was, no is a good thing. No doesn't mean no, just keep asking. You just keep asking until you get a yes. And so, this has been my motto really is
Yeah.
it's okay if I fail. It's just not okay if I don't try. Right?
Exactly. That's so true. I mean, I do live by that. Keep asking, because I promise you, I have asked the ridiculous. That's things that are ridiculous that I know the person or the organization should have said no. And they ended up saying yes. You don't, I mean, if you don't tell yourself no, you've got a shot.
Hmm.
But if you tell yourself no, there's never going to be an opportunity where there's going to be yes. So
Yeah.
I ask, I mean, even when I started my first organization. I had no money, absolutely none, no office space. I couldn't afford a phone. So I just went to different organizations and said, can you give me an office space and a phone? And can I use the printer and the copy machine? Well, how much are you paying us? Nothing, but I'm going to do something that's really great. And, you want to be a part of this. And I had people give me office space and give me, it's ridiculous, but I have learned to ask the ridiculous for the right reasons, with the code of ethics, with integrity. There are people that will open their doors and they will do it because they see you, they see your mission, and they see your heart, and they're like, I do want to be a part of that. So yeah, I think for the right reasons, you can ask people for something you would never ask people.
I love that. It sounds kind of like we're sliding in a little bit to like what early career looked like. And I definitely want to get back to that. But I just want to circle back a little bit to your education and expertise, especially knowing that education doesn't sound like it was something that was, in the plans for you, according to others, right? So what did that look like? What kind of education and expertise have you gained over the years?
Well, I went to a poor performing high school, and actually every once in a while I still collect the improvement plans from this same high school that's still poor performing, and that's been about 25 years. I went to school probably once a week, when I got to high school, my senior year, because once they checked out on me, I'd certainly checked out on them. And I would skip school, I would drink, I would smoke weed, and we would play poker. We had a lot of fun, but education was not something I was interested in. And in fact, my vocation was going to be that of a drug dealer, because of course that's who I saw in my community and that's who was successful in my community. So I had a great idea. My mother was going to California, and she said, collect your alimony check from your father because you're the responsible one, and put it in the bank. And, okay, I will. So she flew off. He dropped off the check. Of course, I went down and cashed the check. And I thought, my harebrained ideas, I'm going to buy, back then it was, marijuana was illegal. So I'm going to buy a pound of weed. I'm going to bag it up. I'm going to sell it. With that profit, I'm going to put myself on, and I'm going to be a drug dealer, and I'm going to replace her money in the bank. Nobody's the wiser. And of course, I'm in the drug business now. So I call all my friends over, and we have a big old party to announce that I'm in the drug business. We're drinking, we're smoking. And of course, I pass out. And of course, I wake up the next day, all the weed's gone, every single. So I
So then your mom came and whipped your butt. I'm angry for her.
Right. No, so I came up with my second, scheme, which is, you're in the neighborhood. So somebody rips you off. I mean, that gets around town. You cannot let that happen. That's your credibility. You're going to be vulnerable to other things now if you don't handle that.
You're a mark.
So yeah. So I call up the guy, of course, that I think stole it. And I told him if he doesn't replace all of my product, I'm going to shoot him. I have no gun. I'm just talking, talking. And so there's a lot that happens, but I end up intimidating the guy, and he's willing to meet me in an alley. We meet in an alley. He gives me whatever he has left of the weed. He has some drugs. Back then it was double dome THC, which was the hot thing. And so now within 24 hours, I'm in the drug business. I got robbed. Now I'm on LaGrange Street, which is a notorious street here in my city. And I sold all the weed. I sold all the double dome THC. And I still don't have enough money. So I have to get my friend who has birth control pills. And now we're selling birth control pills up and down LaGrange Street as double dome THC. Now I have people pissed because they're getting what we call dummies. You're getting a drug that's not a drug. And made just enough money, besides putting my friend at risk for pregnancy now, but I made just enough money to put my mother's alimony money back in her checking account. And it was an abysmal failure. And so I thought, well, maybe I should try this school thing. The drug dealing thing isn't panning out. So I ended up going to community college because I wasn't confident enough to go to like a 4-year university. So I did that. I did fairly well and then
And what did you
transferred.
take?
I took social services technology. So it was like being a social worker, but not really. It was assistant to a social worker.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's great. You're learning from the bottom up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up transferring over to the 4-year university, which they really didn't take many of my credits. So basically, I had to start over and do a 4-year degree. And I did that at the University of Toledo. And
Been there
then,
ever since. No.
yes, there's never an end to the semester. It starts over and over and over. But I got my master's at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland.
Okay.
And that's where I learned, shortly before that, that's where I learned not to say no. So I applied to Case Western. You had to have a 2.7 grade point average, which is basically like a C, a hair above a C. And I had a 2.69, and which is a little hair under a C. But I applied anyway because I had learned, don't tell yourself no. So I applied anyway, let them tell me no. And they didn't admit me, but they did ask to interview me. So I drove to Cleveland for an interview. I was 45 minutes late for the interview.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
What happened, Celia?
um,
Smoking weed?
being
No.
being being cultural, time didn't really mean much to me.
Right. Okay. So we're doing that
So
Caribbean time. Yeah.
that I was, and I was driving like 80. I got a speeding ticket and all the things. And
Oh no.
I went in and I told the guy, he was reading his paper by then. And I went in and I said, hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. Like this, I'm here for the interview 45 minutes ago. And, he put his paper down and he said, yeah, you are late. And he put his paper back up and started reading it again. And so I said, okay. Like I told myself, just walk away. Just walk away. But I see my feet moving forward toward him. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, stop. But I keep walking toward him and I just took my finger and I pulled his paper down. And I said, excuse me, sir. He's like, yeah. I've said, I'm Celia Williamson. I just want a moment of your time. I just want to tell you about my hopes and my dreams and what I've been through and where I'm going. And I'd love to have Case Western's name attached to it. And you mind if I sit down while I'm sitting down? And then I wouldn't let this man go. And then he just, after like 30 minutes, he was like, look, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to personally admit you into this school. And I just want one thing. And I was like, what? He goes, I want to see you walk across that stage during graduation. I believe in you. And so, once I found out that not always works, but you could find people who believe in you if you're trying to do the right thing. So that's really how I got into Case Western. And it's a pretty prestigious school. And I was not of that material.
That was a question I had actually, curious about college and then making the decision to go into 4 years from that. Like, how were your grades? Did you surprise yourself? Like, it seems like you just gained this hunger for education. And it
Yeah.
just sound like it would have been a really positive experience based on the past, but what was it like?
Well, my community college days was not, I was not the stellar student. I got C's, occasionally I got D's. Um, I was going through my first domestic violence relationship then. There was a lot of energy going into hiding what was really happening and away from my studies. I went
Mm-hmm.
to that poor performing high school, so I couldn't write. When I went to community college, the only thing you had to do in Composition 1 was you had to write 10 successful paragraphs, and I couldn't do it. And so I flunked out of that class. And so again, I'm very, stubborn person. So I took it again
Mm-hmm.
and
Good for
I
you.
failed again. And
Mm-hmm.
so I took it a third time and I finally passed. And so I wasn't a great student then. And I spent my electives taking writing classes so that I could improve. And then by the time I got to be a senior, I was like, oh my God. Like, well, first, when I graduated the 2-year degree, I was like, oh my God, I fooled them. But, and it's like, no, you didn't fool them. You passed the classes.
Mm-hmm.
And
You fooled
so,
yourself.
yes, yes.
Before then. Yeah.
And I kind of always knew deep down that I was smart, but not book
Mm-hmm.
smart. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went on to the 4-year degree and I did better. And by my senior year, I was making A's and B's because I really focused in,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not in an abusive relationship at that time.
Yes. So you
So
can concentrate. Yeah.
yeah, I could concentrate. And then I got some self-esteem because, when you see something tangible, you say, wow, that really happened. And so then people encouraged me. I had mentors that said, man, you should get your master's. And I tried it and I did,
Mhm.
and it worked.
Yeah.
So then I wanted the PhD because why not?
Yeah. Because
Uh,
it's torture. That's why, Celia. Torture.
that
Yeah.
is
Right.
why. But, I was so used to living under so much stress and
Mm-hmm.
and being hungry sometimes or being, living. I had leaky roofs, I had mice, I had roaches, I had, you know, it was just, I cannot stay here.
Mm-hmm.
This is not me. It's not for me. I'm not designed for this. Because,
Mm-hmm.
once you start having self-esteem, you start having like real hopes and dreams.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that was
Yeah.
the very first year in my PhD program. At the end of that first year, they called me in, and the other PhD mentors told me that I was the weakest student in the program.
Wow.
And I went home and cried. And
Mm.
I just thought, I had dragged my daughter to a different state. She was under 5. I quit my job. I sold my house. I didn't have anything else to go back to, really. I mean, my mom's house, of course. But so that second year, the end of that second year, I won the Researcher of the Year award because,
Wow. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. From weakest student to award winner. Ah, that's
yes, because
awesome.
I really didn't understand the socialization, the culture of what a doctoral student has to do. I didn't
Mm.
get that because I didn't have a mentor at that level. I didn't have family that did that. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to behave.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So once I knew that it was like study all the time, we're serious. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Once I understood that, then I understood the rules of the game. Socialization is the rules of the game. And
Yeah.
then I could comply with that and even exceed that. I just
Mhm.
studied.
And you have an honorary doctorate as well.
I do, just from doing the work over the years. Actually, the woman who runs G100, the global 100 women, of which you are the global woman of Canada, honored me with that for
Mm.
the social justice work that I've done over the 30 years from a school in India.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you talked a little bit about, sorry, I just want to circle back to this. I made a little note here. You were talking about being in school and kind of having that distraction from dealing with the domestic violence, and then, being in school another time without that distraction. I just wanted to kind of comment on that around how much personal issues in, folks with lived experience, folks who are survivors of some form of gender-based violence, how those personal experiences can really affect our work, our productivity, the quality of what we're doing, our ability to achieve our dreams, and sometimes even our ability to build relationships, all of which further affect our self-esteem,
yes,
making us more vulnerable to, bullshit,
yes,
really.
yes,
Right?
exactly.
But just, again, perfect example, because it's never that you weren't capable, right? It's that you didn't have the safety
Yes.
to be able to grow and learn.
Yes, I didn't have the quietness. Sometimes my time wasn't mine because if your abuser walks in, you have to, what does he need? What is he thinking? Is he in a good mood? Did I do this right? How should I answer? All of your things, you go into survival mode. It's about survival and safety, and that's your primary. So being able to put your sort of intellectual thinking cap on in another area is not only foreign, it's not in your best interest when you're
Yes.
when you're dealing with that. And then even when that person is gone out of your life, well, first you don't know when they're ever going to show up, pop out of the bushes, kick your door in. But
Yes.
later on, even when they're gone, you you don't feel worthy. This person is sort of beating you down, not physically so much as, emotionally. And you just, yeah, it's a process. And that's why I
Mhm.
love, um, for me anyway, tangible accomplishments
Mhm.
really lifted my self-esteem and told
Mhm.
me, I mean, even today, out of all the things, I'm still learning, I'm
Yes.
still working through
Always.
things, and
Mhm.
I'm still discovering that, I have to pat myself on the back and go, Celia, you don't have to work so hard now. You don't have to prove yourself now. Who are you trying
Yes.
to prove? It's like I still feel if I don't work hard, maybe I'm not worthy of this position. And then I
Yes.
have to say to myself, you've done the things. And even if you didn't do the things, when you lay your head on the pillow at night, feel good
Mhm.
that you've done some things, not all the things.
Yeah. And that's
And
part of that socialization, I think, that capitalist hustle culture, right, is part of the socialization. And at some point, we have to move into this place where we acknowledge that rest is resistance, right? We are within a colonial system that's going to really drive us to do things that are not in the best interest of our social wellness, our mental wellness, our emotional wellness, our spiritual wellness. And it's up to us to
yes.
really take that power back over our time, over our creativity. Not saying be terrible employees, but absolutely have some limits and some boundaries and be paying attention to what you need to be well, because that rest is just as important as the hustle.
So much so. And I still have I may be calling you up every now and then and say, can you repeat that again? Because I really that is what my struggle is now is
Mhm.
get the rest in. And I'm doing that now, but it's still a struggle. It will creep up to me and say, "Hey, you remember you have this too," and it's like, "But I'm going to rest right now,"
Mhm.
because again, it's the system telling you go, go,
Mhm.
go,
Yeah.
and
And you're not good enough if,
yes,
right? You're
yeah,
only good enough when. And we
yeah,
need to get rid of that and or kind of thinking and start moving into both and, right?
yes,
I am both productive and entitled to rest,
yes,
right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, and a little bit of fun. So,
Amen to that. What is fun?
I know,
Can you
I
define that for
know.
me? Yeah. Working's fun for me. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do so much enjoy what I do. So when people say, "Oh man, you work out that," like part of that is I do enjoy what I do and I'm inspired by what I do and I love to be around people who are like you see it when they found their thing, like they love it, whether it's accounting or whether it's whatever it is. You see
Mm-hmm.
them not really stressed in a bad way. Like they kind of enjoy it. And I get up in the morning and I'm still excited to do the things that I'm into right now. And so, I'm still loving it. But now I have learned to rest and learn to have some fun. But that little voice is still in there saying,
Yes.
yeah, you need to get back to work. So
Yes. Well, and those are the drivers. Again, thinking about victimization, I think that oftentimes we focus too much on the band-aid. Like I described, for example, sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. A lot of people want to focus on that as the issue. And not to say that it's not, but the underlying layers of that, all the way down to, again, poor self-esteem, right? Those layers don't go away when you stop being trafficked. And those
yes,
are the layers that we really need to be attending to. And that kind of comes back to that ego-based work, because if I've saved you and you're no longer on the streets, I feel good about me and the work that I've done, but I'm not acknowledging that you still have work to do and need support in that work.
that's right. And that I think that is the struggle with people who have a cursory understanding of sex trafficking or any kind of interpersonal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That if I find you housing, then I can say I found the housing. And you have sort of some payoff from that. But what many people who only have, I mean, we have people that have a very top of the surface understanding, and they're going out and passing laws that are really creating collateral damage
Yes.
for vulnerable and poor people. And that's one of the issues is, what I see in women, particularly when we talk about trauma and PTSD, and, they want to talk about night sweats and triggers and terrors and the things like that. But what I see is most often two issues in women, particularly that have experienced interpersonal trauma: powerlessness and shame.
Mm-hmm.
These two things
Mm-hmm.
derail a person's hopes and dreams. I mean, shame is so deep that,
Yes.
I mean, it incorporates worthlessness and low self-esteem and all the things
Mm-hmm.
um, that you don't even have to tell me uh, you know, go to the back of the bus. I'll walk to the back of the bus, or you don't even have to tell me. And powerlessness, like this is my lot in life, and this is it, and that's it. And I can't really change it, and I'm just trying to make it. And those two sort of derail your hopes and your dreams, and it steals your joy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, but even when they talk about trauma and PTSD and medication and treatment, they don't really talk about the daily living skills needed to combat powerlessness and shame.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, I mean, and I experienced that in domestic violence. It's just like, you know, I was sabotaging I get right to the threshold
Mm-hmm.
of something I wanted. And
Yep.
then something would happen and but I was comfortable.
I feel like you're telling on me right now.
Because it's like we all experience it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I could blame it on whatever, but it's and I was just talking to a person yesterday and I said, did you apply for admission yet to school? And no, because I'm on house arrest until mid-Jan. Okay, well, that mean you can't use the phone? No. I said, okay, why don't you I want you to sit down and list 10 ways that you're going to sabotage yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will bring it into your consciousness. And then when you start to do it, you can skip all that and you can just go number 3. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just get real. When we call each other You can say, Celia, I'm practicing number 5 right now. Okay.
Love
So
it.
yeah, but that's what I did a lot is self-sabotage. And I still will get to the brink and some things will start happening. And I'll start saying, well, I'm not going to send that form today. I'm not going to call them and I'll be like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
So
with you,
yeah.
sister. Yeah. Yeah. So and that's where I'm like, rest is resistance. I don't care. But sometimes, sometimes rest is just foolish.
Yeah,
So you
but
gotta you gotta know when to rest also. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember you talking about the podcast and then putting the pieces in place and now doing the podcast. So it's good for the audience to understand that people still get to that threshold and still fear or whatever will take over, but they just end up pushing through it and doing it.
You just got to do it anyways. Yeah. So, there is that imposter syndrome. There's the shame, there's the worthlessness. I have a girlfriend right now who was the first person in her, two actually, who were the first folks in their family to do any post secondary school. One, it took her probably until she was 27 just to get her high school diploma because she kept quitting and then
Wow.
going back, quitting and then going back. She's now a doctorate, owns her own business, is doing fabulous. I
Oh,
have
wow.
another one who, she was to go to school for nursing. And I remember, like yourself, there was one class that she just couldn't get. And I remember her saying to me, I don't care. I'm going to be a nurse and I'm going to keep doing that class until I pass. She did it 4 times before she
Wow.
passed. And at the end of the day, we can be and do anything we want. The
Mhm.
trick is do not give up on yourself.
That's it. That's it.
That's
That's
it.
hmm
Right? Eventually, you're going to find your tribe.
that,
Um, I'm curious, Celia, why trafficking? I mean, why
yeah.
sex trafficking? Why did you choose this work? What brought you into it? And what are you doing now?
Yeah. I worked at a little community center on the north side of Toledo in my city, and that's was the highest crime area. I think it still is today. I was a social worker and I was helping families and, just all kinds of things. I had people that couldn't read and I would read their mail. They bring it to me every day, or we take people to the grocery store um, I would drive by these women that were out there. And the thing is I didn't like them. I thought, go, what are you doing? We're trying to work with kids and families and healthy environments. And here you're out here and I'm sweeping up condoms. And what are you doing? And then I had a friend who drove into work and told me, yeah, I threw a glass of water on one woman. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't like that. so, and so I went in my office. I said, I don't like that at all. What
Mm,
is this coming up in me?
mhm,
And I thought, oh, I know okay. So social workers, we're supposed to be working with the poor, the vulnerable, and the oppressed. That is our mission. And I'm working with the beautiful, the worthy, and the deserving, patting myself on the back, thinking I'm doing a good job.
mhm,
And I didn't like this oppression that I saw.
mhm.
And so I thought, okay, as a good student, I go to the library and I'm looking up stuff like programming. What do you do? What do you now see anything? Um, and the research I do see is about HIV. And I'm thinking, wait, are they funding just keep the HIV away from the good middle class people in society? I mean, these are the conclusions I'm coming up with. So there's nothing. The only thing in my city was called arrest you and incarcerate you. And I was like, how's that working? No, it's not working. So I started to build relationship and I started to smile as I went by. I started waving. These
As
women
you went
thought I was
by them
crazy.
on the street, you're saying?
Yeah. And they would just turn their heads away from me, like, what is this crazy woman doing? And then I would slow my car down. I would say, good morning, and and I kept doing that until one day I was leaving the center. I was getting ready to lock up and leave. And one of the women came to the door that I had been saying good morning to, and she said it was her son's birthday, and he was going to be 5, and he loved blue, the color blue. And she goes, you've seen me, I didn't make any money, I'm struggling. And so we went and we got some gifts that we had in the attic from an old Christmas party, got some coloring, food coloring and some cake mix and all the things.
Mm.
And from then on, I would stop and I would talk to her for as long as she would let me before she got uncomfortable. I would get out of the car and I would talk. And so I just built this relationship, and then she would introduce me and introduce me. And I just ended up like 3 times a week on the streets for 6 months, just spending my day talking to women. And then I said, well, if we developed a program that would help and support women, what would it look like? And so what would it be called? And so they named it, they designed it. And I went to the city council and I begged them for money. And they promptly said no. And then I did a needs assessment that I learned in school in my master's program. And I went to give it to the city council, and they said, do you have an appointment? No. I was really politically ignorant. So the secretary got up to go to the bathroom, and I saw her leave the desk. And I just,
Uh-oh.
right, this is honest to God's truth. I turned around and I put the needs assessment on one of the city councilman's desks that I thought was probably most sort of maybe sympathetic or something to the issue. So he read the needs assessment because it's on his desk. He thought he was supposed to read it. And so that's really how the whole thing got started. And I got a little bit of seed money from the city to start doing street outreach. And so I did that, and I built my street credibility. And so when women went to jail or whatever, they would go to court and they would say, I want to go to this program that I had designed. And so the judges would be like, what is that? And so it really grew from a grassroots issue. And the program ran from 1993 to 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And it stayed kind of grassroots with case management and groups we ran.
That's beautiful. And now, what are you doing now? Where's that brought you?
Now I've done the same thing at the university. I, got my PhD, got a job at the university, started the conference, which is now in its 22nd year. But
And the name of the conference?
the conference is the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference, and people can find it at traffickingconference.com in the year. And it's always in September. But we started the conference just by saying, hey, we need to talk to other people in other communities about this issue. What is that called? Oh, that's called the conference. Okay, let's have one. Put up a website. They were like, well, we don't have any money. Like, we never have money. Just put up the website. We're gonna call it a national conference. They're like, who is endorsing, who is telling us that it could be called the national conference? I'm like, I'm telling you it can be called a national conference. So nobody would do it, but I got these students, students believe, and they are bright. I like to hang with them because they inspire me. And they said, hell yeah, we can do it. And they put up the website, and we got people that came from all across the US. We thought we would have it one day, 1 hour, a presenter every hour. We ended up having it 3 days because we had so many presenters that just wanted to collaborate or talk to each other. They were so siloed. And, we're cultural people, right? So my mother cooked, my sister cooked for the people and brought it in. And the university came over and said, what the hell are you doing? Who authorized you to do this? I said, I did. Well, you can't do that. So I love, because my saying is always, oh, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry.
I have a professor who was, the one thing I remember him teaching us is it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Exactly. So I
Uh,
said, my one of my favorite lines is, "Yeah, I didn't know I couldn't do that." But and by the second year, they found out my family was cooking, and they said, "You have to use the approved caterer. You can't just be people can't just bring food."
mhm,
But oh, okay. Well, I didn't know I couldn't do that. I stand corrected. So we just kept doing that until around the fourth or fifth year. Some of the people that attended would call the central administration and they would say, "This is amazing. Like your
mhm.
your university is so progressive." And then, they would say things like, "Well, yeah, of course we are," take some of the credit.
If it fails, it's your fault. If it succeeds, it's ours. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So they would charge me for the room. It's all everything except supported.
Mhm,
Until people were acknowledging this is very innovative.
mhm,
And then they didn't help me. They just didn't charge me. They let me use the
mm.
space and things like that. And so you kind of seeing a pattern here of maybe stubbornness and not listening. And yes. So yes and yes. So that's
Passion and purpose is what I'll reframe that as.
thank you,
Okay.
thank you. With some integrity and with some code of ethics. I mean, you can't just get out there and do something harmful and hurtful. But
Mhm,
I look back on the social justice leaders like Martin Luther King. The leaders did not follow rules and policies that were unjust or that didn't
mhm.
help the people. I mean, you don't follow along just because they said you have to follow along.
Yes.
So I will color outside the lines if it's necessary and if it helps the people.
When you don't have new results by doing the same thing.
Right.
So this is my challenge with education and systems as I feel, we're constantly training people to be carbon copies and to reproduce work that's already being done, which is really just an exercise in maintaining the status quo. There's no change that comes from that. And no real growth for our communities, our nation, our society, or the survivors that we're trying to serve.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that kills people's creativity in it, and so and that could be by design, as a conspiracy
Mhm.
theorist.
Well,
But
tool of colonialism, right?
yes,
We don't want new thinkers. We don't want to actually do anything other than maintain the status quo because that may create some emancipation that then affects the elitists and their
exactly.
control and their dominance, right?
Which is why we learn about the wars and the dates in history class instead of learning about your rights and social justice leaders, because we might be growing people then that challenge the very system. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I color out of the lines a lot until it becomes normalized. Like in my state now,
Mhm.
it's very normalized to talk about the issue. In fact, politicians and the governor and the Ohio Attorney General, they host the anti-trafficking coalitions and commissions
Yes.
and that's great.
Mhm.
But somebody has to come along as pioneers and buck the system.
Start the
And
conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Put a spotlight on the elephant in the room,
That's
really,
right.
right?
That's
Lift
right.
that carpet up and look underneath. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
exactly.
so that's been part of my role. And now my state, of course, is scaling way back to
Mm,
to say things like, you know, um, racism really isn't an issue. Gender-based violence, well, we've already got enough in place.
mhm,
Women, you have equal rights to do whatever so why we don't need to do anything special. Um,
mhm.
and so it's rolling a lot of things backward.
Backwards. Yeah. Well, and that's a byproduct of government as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I can't even imagine what women and people of color, what that transition feels like right now. You know,
yes,
so it
yes.
is
And of
changing.
course, in this country, you know, our immigrants are very fearful and things like that. But in
Mhm.
terms of, our work, my work, I will continue to do whatever I can at the university to help people, help students, and help my community, which is local to global. And, the latest thing I'm doing is really working on a behavioral health organization to focus on healing from interpersonal traumas through groups and treatments and case management and all the things. So that's my next endeavor that I'm excited to get involved in.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say that the Human Trafficking Conference is one of my favorite
Oh,
um,
good.
programs, experiences. It's something that I talk about quite a bit, and I just want to kind of highlight what I find is very unique about it, which caused me to fall in love with it the first time I came. And there's a couple different pieces. I think first is the open invitation and the prioritization of lived experience experts.
Mhm.
Um, Having lived experience, people come in and share their knowledge. But, alongside that is that there isn't a focus on abolitionism, right? We're not getting locked into this polarization of values. We're coming together as a community that wants to address harm being done, whether it's to pro-sex, abolitionists, what have you, and finding those common ground, finding overlapping concerns, finding ways to work together to address the needs of the people we're serving, as opposed to working in silos and trying to be right at
Mhm.
the risk of good quality service, collaboration, and expansion of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I that's super valuable. Like, we have folks who are in this podcast who, were pro-sex, did put themselves through school, and had, other experiences. However, in talking with them, they fully recognize that exploitation exists in that field. They saw it firsthand, even if they don't identify as themselves being personally exploited. And those are really important conversations for us
Yeah.
to be having with one
Yes.
another,
I'm so glad that
right?
you sort of you put the entire conference in a nutshell. You should be our publicist because you came and you got it, because that is exactly what we do, and that's why we call ourselves an academic conference. And
Mm.
people don't always understand that distinction, but an academic conference is not a political conference where everybody comes together and everybody agrees and everybody reaffirms what everybody agrees.
Mm-hmm.
An academic conference challenges you to say, here are people that you might not agree with, here are people you definitely don't agree with. Listen to them, because
Mm-hmm.
if you sit and listen, you might walk away thinking, okay, I got to expand my mind to incorporate this new way of thinking. Or I walk away saying, that's why I don't agree with that side. But now I walk away understanding that side's point so that I can be clear in what I don't agree with. Either
Yes.
way, it pushes society forward and
Mm-hmm.
not have people stuck in their silos being reinforced by each other. It's always uncomfortable um, to have diversity of thought, to hear from people who think differently than you do, and you don't have to agree with them, but
Mm-hmm.
you need to know what they're thinking, because that's going to impact how you should respond and what you should do even if you don't agree.
Right.
So yeah.
And it helps to expand your thinking as well, I think, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, we know how to respond, but we also now know how to look for nuances that we didn't know existed before, right? Um, we learn something, but we also have the opportunity to teach something. And again, it goes back to, like, we're starting conversations,
Yes.
right? Not with people who are saying what we're saying, but with people who are saying something different that we can learn something from. And again, if we want to move this work forward, those are the kind of conversations that are really important. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Celia, for coming today. It has just
Yeah.
been so incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always.
Much success with the podcast. I'm sure you are helping many, many people who will listen to it. And I hope they get something from it. Take what you need and leave the rest.
Mhm. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for our conversation with our sister's keeper, Dr. Celia Williamson. We're so glad to have had you listening today, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the future.